Hello and welcome back. This video is the fifth in a series of videos for new weaver to learn how to weave. And today we're going to be talking about reading drafts. And a draft is basically the pattern that you use to create a project on the loom. I actually have done this video twice already. And when I watch it, it just looks so simple that I wonder if I'm getting across everything that I need to tell you about them. But after doing it twice and looking at it again, I really feel that I've covered everything you need to know. I'm going to show you the basics of the draft form and how it relates to the drawdown within the draft. And I'm showing you on iWeaveit, which is a program for either your iPads, iPhones. They have an Android version and also PC and Mac versions. The Android and iPhone version is around $20, so very affordable, and it's great for designing, for just playing around with the draft to create your own. So that's something I'd suggest you take a look at also, and I will have links to that. I'm going to go to the computer and we'll sit down and show you how to read a draft.
In this video, we'll learn to read and create a weaving draft to design a pattern. The first thing I suggest you purchase is the Hand Weaver's Pattern Directory by Ann Dixon. This is my favorite reference book for weaving patterns. I pull it out every time I start a project. See page 80 for the basic rose path pattern that I'll be using for this project. I've changed it slightly, as you will see as we continue. This book is available on Amazon.com, and I consider it a must-have for all weavers. I'll put the link for it at the bottom in the description. Here's a blank weaving draft. It has 4 sections. Across the top are horizontal lines. This is for the threading. Down the side are vertical lines. This is for the treadling. In the corner, they connect in a box. This is called the tie-up. And the gray area is considered the drawdown, and that's where the pattern will appear. Let's look at the threading area again. Between each of the lines is a space, and that represents the shafts. In this case, we have 4 shafts. If you have an 8-shaft loom, there'd be 8 spaces for each shaft. We read a weaving draft by starting at the corner and working toward the left for the threading, and then from the bottom at shaft 1 towards the top at shaft 4. Now we'll look at a draft with a pattern in it. This is what a draft will look like when the pattern is written in. Drafts are a short way to write the information needed to create a pattern that all weavers will understand. Although you can copy a blank weaving draft and fill it in by hand, I highly suggest you invest in a weaving program or app. My favorite weaving app is called iWeaveit by Canyon Art. It's available for iPad and iPhone, Android, Mac, and PC. I like the iPhone, iPad version. It's available through the App Store for about $20. I like to take my iPad to the loom while I'm threading the heddles, and I like to play with it when I'm creating a pattern. It'll calculate the warp and weft yarns needed. It's a fun and easy to use app. The threading and drawdown. Let's see how it all comes together. With a threading pattern inserted across the top and the lift pattern in the box. In the corner, I've gone ahead and put a basic twill lift pattern that I always get from the Ann Dixon's book. Put that in first. We'll look at the threading and how the drawdown works. The gold are the warp threads, and we can see which shaft they are threaded on. In the blue box, we can see that treadle 1 will lift both shafts 1 and 2. And as we look across the threading line, we can see every time shaft 1 and 2 appears, we would color in a gold mark to indicate that the warp is above the weft and would be showing. So we can see the first are 1 and 2, and then it skips to a single one, and then 3 together, 1 again, 3 together, and 1 again. The second treadle, highlighted in blue, we can see that it will lift shafts 2 and 3. And again, we look across the weaving draft. Anywhere we see 2 and 3, we will color in a golden mark, and that would show us the pattern as we go across. The third treadle is going to lift shafts 3 and 4. And again, as you look across the pattern, anywhere you see 3 and 4, you would put a gold mark in to indicate the pattern. That's showing where the warp is going over the weft. And the fourth treadle is going to lift shafts 1 and 4. And similarly, you look across the threading line to see where the gold thread would be above the brown weft. The fifth treadle in this pattern is going to lift treadle 3 again. So we look across and it's exactly the same as treadle 3 above it. You should always have a tabby or plain weave set up on your loom. It's 2 treadles that are alternated. They create a pattern where the weft goes over every other thread. It's used for several things like spreading the warp and the hem area if you want it to be different from the rest of the cloth. As you can see, those are the 2 extra treadles that are not part of the pattern. The size of the pattern. You can tell the size of the pattern. First, determine the set of the yarn or thread that you're using. We determine that the yarn we'll use is set at 12 ends per inch. Next, we need to count across 12 ends in the threading chart. We can see 12 threads is about 1.5 of the pattern repeats. Now you can imagine how bold or subtle the pattern would be. Let's take a look at iWeaveit on my iPad. It's an app. It's the second one down on the left. The app is called iWeaveit by Canyon Art. It was written by Sally Breckenridge. Sally has a video on how to use this program. She uses it on the Mac, but it's very similar to what you would use on the iPad. Now that we have the app opened, we can select how many shafts we want to use and how many treadles we want to use. On this particular pattern, we're using 4 shafts and 6 treadles. It also lets you select whether you have a rising shed or a sinking shed. So we'll accept that pattern. And this is the form that comes up. So you can see the threading area, the horizontal lines. We have 4 shafts. The box in the corner is for the tie-up, and then the columns coming down the right side are for our treadling pattern. Now we're going to look at the box in the corner, and that's where we put our lift plan. To begin with, I just start with a design that I like, a draft from a book, and input the lift plan that has already been decided. We're going to use a basic twill pattern, and in the box it'll show which 2 shafts are lifted at the same time. For the first row, it's going to be shafts 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 1 and 4. And that is a typical twilled lift plan. Then there's 2 additional boxes. In these boxes are where we put our tabby or plain weave, and that is 1 and 3, 2 and 4. They're used alternately while we weave, and that's the simple pattern for the lift plan on a twill pattern. I've selected the threading at the top, and it opens up a little bit wider so you can see what you're doing with the threading. I'm going to use gold as the color because that's the color yarn I'm using for my warp thread. When I select one, it puts the first one for the first heddle on the lower line. The next one is heddle 2 on shaft 2, heddle 3 on shaft 3, and heddle 4 on shaft 4. Now the pattern changes slightly. It's going to come down to 1 again, back up to shaft 4, 3, 2, and we don't add the extra 1 because as this pattern repeats, it starts with 1 as the very first heddle. And that's the complete pattern. It's what's called a rose path pattern, and it's a pointed twill. Now we're going to move over to the right side, which is the treadling pattern. I'm going to select brown as our color for the weft, and then start inputting the different threading pattern. Our pattern is going to start with treadle 1, then 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. To make it a little bit different, I'm going to add a section here that will add a small diamond shape, and that's 4, 3, and 4. It elongates the pattern slightly and adds a different color diamond between the gold diamond, then you get a brown diamond, and then back to gold. Now we're going to go back to the threading box. I want to show you a little bit how this pattern app works. If you look at the top, there's a bullseye that's highlighted in blue, and then there's a box next to it which I pressed. It's now highlighted in blue also. That box lets us select a range, so I can copy this pattern by just highlighting it with the red. Then I'm going to come up to the copy button, press that, and now I will paste it to duplicate the pattern that I've chosen. Now I can change a few things also. I'm going to select the second set of threading lines, and I'm going to change the color of the warp threads. All I need to do is come to the right and choose another color from the sidebar. Let's choose this coral color. When I pressed the color, it changed everything that I had highlighted. So it's an easy way to play with the draft and see if you want to change the colors. You can zoom in and zoom out to see how the fabric will look when it's in normal size. Or when you zoom in, you can see each threading line. There are a few other things that you can do with this app. With the coral color selected, I can go up and you see there's other boxes next to the scissor and copy. It will flip the pattern from side to side, or also flip it from top to bottom. On this particular one, it's not showing a great deal of change because it is the pointed twill that we're using. But these are a few fun things to use on this particular app. I'm going to put this back to where we started. And here's our rose path design as we designed it to begin with. There's some other selections here. When you go to the upper box on the right, it offers you to create a new program, open another program that you've worked on previously, save it, you can email it. It gives you a selection of pattern setups and color setups. You can even print it out, which I find great. When I finish designing a pattern, I print out the pattern along with my calculations, and I have that information when I go to the loom. There's a way that you can change the colors. You can change the color to anything that you want. Go to the color selection guide, highlight one of the colors, and then select a color you want to change it to. You can have it dark or light, any color that you want, and then set the color, and that will change your selection boxes on the side when you go back to the planning stage. So let's set a few more boxes at various colors. We have a nice purple color, blues. See as I select how deep a color I want. And we'll go back to the main page again. Now we'll look at the toolbar. On the right, in the upper right, you'll see what looks like a wrench and a screwdriver. Let's press that and see the options. It brings up something that's called trompe as writ. That means literally step as it's written. Old patterns used to be written with just the threading lines and your tie-up. And they assume you would trompe as writ, which means to treadle the same way that the threading is written. In addition, we have options to turn the draft, add a tabby, color and weave, and finding the floats, how many threads of a float there are. So let's take a look at what happens when we use trompe as writ. When I select that, it's going to take the threading design and put it in the box on the right, identical to the threading. It changed the color all to yellow, so we're going to go up and change the weft color so we can see the pattern a little easier. Trompe as writ gives us a beautiful symmetrical design. As you'll see when I change this color, let's go to the upper part. I've selected the threading. Now I've selected red for the color. And you can see it's a very symmetrical pattern. It's a nice way to start your design. And then from there, you can change things in the design to create whatever you would like. And as I zoom out, you can see the pattern when it's small, and zoom in, we can see each thread as we look across the pattern guide. Looking up to the right side again, I'm going to go to what looks like a calculator and a ball of yarn. That brings up our project setup sheet. If you watched the last video, I showed you how to use this by simply inputting the set, the picks per inch, the waist, your loom waist, and your shrinkage percentage. This program calculates everything you need to know for the length of your warp, for the heddles you'll be using on the loom. You input how long you want your project to be, and it calculates everything that you need to know. Also along the right hand side is a square box with some dots in it. This is for tracking your threading and your treadling as you're working. I believe that this is in addition to the basic program. It costs a little bit more for this item. It is something that I do use, especially for threading. It goes step by step so that it makes it easy to know exactly where you are as you're threading. And it's helpful with tracking your weaving as you go as well. Mostly I use it for the threading. Let's look at the three items at the bottom right side. What looks like the colorful shuttles brings up the information you need for the program itself. Next to it is a question mark, and that shows you whatever page you're on. If you press the information buttons, you'll get information for specifically what you're doing at that point. In the upper left corner, there's an information button. Again, it brings up information about the page that you're working on. So whenever you need help, just click one of these I buttons or information buttons, and it will explain everything you need to know. When you've completed your design, come to the upper right corner again, press Save. It gives you an option to name your design and save it in a location either on your computer or iPad that you're working on, or in iCloud. You can set up different folders. I have a few of my patterns in twills or various pattern designs This one's a 12, so I'm going to save it under 12 and save it directly to my iPad. And that's about it for this app. You'll have fun just playing around with different drafts and creating your own patterns using it.
I hope you found this video informative. I hope you understand now how to read a draft. And if you're not quite sure, as we work with the draft, threading the loom and then weaving, you'll better understand it as you're working with each part of the draft. It's easy to find a draft on the internet. There are books that I mentioned, the Ann Dixon's book. There are other draft books that you can get, but Pinterest is another great place to look up drafts. And there's also a website called Ravelry, and they have a weaving forum there, and many people post their projects online with the draft information. So there's a couple places that you can look for drafts. In our next video, we're going to measure the warp. We're going to use a warping mill to do that. And it's something that I built, so I'm going to show you how the warping mill works. I'll explain how warping board works, and we'll actually start doing the project. Hope to see you again. Thanks.